Welcome to Reinventing-U. I'm your host, Danielle Silverman. I believe that in today's world of ever-constant evolution, the only career change that matters is when what you do matches who you are and what you believe. This show is where you'll learn how embracing change and reinventing yourself will help you navigate any disruptions and lead a life of happiness and fulfillment, especially in this ever-changing world. Your purpose and your meaning will drive your personal transformation. As I like to say, it's your vision, your life. Be passionate about it. Reinventing-U starts now. Hello, everybody. I'm Danielle Silverman, and you're listening to Reinventing-U on Transformation Talk Radio, a show about what it means to pursue a career and a life that corresponds to who you are, to help you find your purpose and to live it. If you'd like to learn more about what that means and what I do, I invite you to visit my website at www.reinventing-u.com. That's www.reinventing-u.com and book a free session with me. Today, I'm going to talk about a very hot topic that's been in the news a lot recently. Two very hot topics, in fact, the Great Resignation and quiet quitting. And I want you to know that these two things are actually very different. They're very distinct, and they're really hitting the workforce very hard today. We'll look at what these expressions mean, what they mean for you, why you should care, and what you can do about them. I'll be sharing some startling statistics with you, and I won't hesitate to give you my opinion about what's going on. So let's first talk about the Great Resignation, something so important that 60 Minutes aired a report on it this year. So what is the Great Resignation? It's a term that was coined by Anthony Klotz, a professor of management at University College London School of Management in May 2021, I believe. He predicted that there would be a mass sustained exodus, that is, a higher than usual number of employees voluntarily leaving their jobs in late 2020 and early 2021. The more you get to know me, the more you'll learn that I really like going back to basics. So what's the meaning of the word resignation? Well, in essence, it means giving up. In this case, giving up your job, quitting your job, hopefully for a valid reason. But it also means submission or acquiescence, as in the expression to meet one's fate with resignation. A strange word, right? Employees are giving up their jobs. But are they resigned to their fate? I don't think so. If they were really resigned, they would not, as multiple surveys shown, be leaving their jobs in droves, because leaving means you're doing something, not submitting to the situation. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The problem is most people who leave their jobs don't necessarily know what they're going to do afterwards. They just know that they're not happy where they are. And this made me think of the times in my life when I really wanted to quit my job. There were two times, in fact, and in both instances, I felt I was in a situation where I simply wasn't being valued. In one instance, I had a boss who was constantly asking me to give 130% effort. One day I told him that the problem wasn't that I couldn't give him 130%. The problem was that I was currently giving him 300%, and I just couldn't give any more. Over time, the situation got worse to the point that I was exhausted, both mentally, physically, emotionally, you name it. And I thought to myself, I really have three choices. I could look for a job somewhere else. I could go back to school, or I could sell all of my belongings and travel the world, which was something I might have liked to do, but I didn't. I gave myself 6 months to figure this out. And at the end of 3 months, my decision was made. I was going back to school. That's the story of how I got my MBA. In the second instance, I remember very clearly my first day on a new and exciting job. I'd been hired as director of marketing and communication for a software company. The current director, we'll call her Jane, was leaving to go and live in the US. She just married somebody who lived in the US. On my first day there, she was still occupying her office, which would soon become my office. But in the meantime, I was relegated to a cubicle in a very traffic-laden area in the middle of a hallway. On a positive note, one of the staff members who's I'm still in contact with today told me that they were holding a farewell lunch for Jane, and did I want to join them? I said yes, of course. But then throughout the morning, I noticed that Jane's best friend in the company seemed to be following me around. Everywhere I went, there she was. And the third time I noticed this, I was just coming out of the washroom, and there she was, just standing there as if waiting for me. I looked at her and I asked her if there was something she needed. She seemed a little embarrassed at first, and then she blurted out that Jane didn't want me going to her lunch. You know, I simply don't understand jealousy or pettiness. If Jane didn't want me there or didn't like me, why did she hire me in the first place? I almost quit there and then on my very first day on the job. Instead, I gathered myself together. I looked at the odds of employment versus unemployment, and I decided to stick it out. I was there 10 years. There were a lot of really wonderful moments in those 10 years, and there were some very bad moments as well. And in retrospect, I think that quitting might have given me the opportunity to find myself a little sooner. Does that mean that I advocate quitting your job? Not necessarily. It depends on the reasons, and it depends on who you are. So why are people today thinking of leaving their jobs? It's very simple. The pandemic has given people an opportunity to rethink their lives and to realize that there are some things that they're willing to do and others that they're not willing to put up with, like bad bosses, jealous coworkers, or long commutes to work. As Simon Sinek says in his foreword to the book Find Your Why, fulfillment is a right and not a privilege. Every single one of us is entitled to feel fulfilled by the work we do, to wake up feeling inspired to go to work, to feel safe, larger than when we're there, and to return home with a sense that we've contributed to something ourselves. Fulfillment is not a lottery. It's not a feeling reserved for a lucky few who get to say, I love what I do. That's what this show is about. Helping you figure out what it is you want to do with your life so that you can experience this fulfillment day in and day out. You're listening to Reinventing-U with Danielle Silverman. Stay tuned. When we come back, some startling statistics. We're back on Reinventing-U with Danielle Silverman. This is the place where you can learn about career trends and be inspired about what to do with your life. If you'd like to learn more about this or book a free consult to speak to me about your particular needs, please visit my website at www.reinventing-u.com, www.reinventing-u.com. Today, we're talking about the Great Resignation. I shared with you some of my experiences and situations where I was tempted to quit my job. Did you know that last year, in 2021, 40% of employees were thinking of quitting their jobs? That's worldwide. More than half of these were Generation Z. That's the 18 to 25-year-olds. This was according to the Future of Work survey by the World Economic Forum. But that was last year. Have you heard the latest statistics? The Gallup organization, in their 2022 State of the Global Workplace report that came out just this past June, found that 60% of people were detached at work and 19% were downright miserable. That's 79% of employees worldwide. I'd like to read to you the CEO's introduction to this Gallup report, simply because it's so well written I can't say it better myself. So forgive me if I look as if I'm reading, because I am. So it starts off like this: 81,396 hours. That's how much of life most of us spend working. The only thing we spend more time doing is sleeping. If we spend so much of life at work, how is life at work going? According to the world's workers, not well. Gallup finds 60% of people are emotionally detached at work and 19% are miserable. But is that a surprise or a statistical explanation of the obvious? The idea that work sucks is everywhere. It's been the subject of ancient philosophers, world leaders, your colleagues, and even pop culture. Comedian George Carlin once quipped, "Oh, you hate your job. Why didn't you say so? There's a support group for that. It's called Everybody, and they meet at the bar." Carlin's joke works because it's true. But workplace misery isn't funny. Being miserable at work can bring more suffering to a person's life than being unemployed. And then there's the false workplace proverb. In quotes, find a job that you enjoy doing, and you will never have to work again in your life. This quote is often misattributed to Mark Twain or to Confucius, we don't know. But regardless of where it came from, the popular adage has a different problem. It's not true. Work, according to the Oxford Languages, is activity involving mental or physical effort done in order to achieve a purpose or result. Exerting mental or physical effort to achieve anything is rarely done without stress, worry, or even pain. Don't you just love this guy? He goes back to the dictionary just like me. Nobel laureate and best-selling author Daniel Kahneman once said there were periods when he worked alone on writing that were terrible, when he felt miserable. Stress, anxiety, and maybe a little pain will always be part of a high-performing job. But those negative emotions cannot be the very soul of someone's job. Yet that is exactly the work-life experience for the 19% of workers who are actively disengaged. As I said, I really could not have said it better myself. These numbers are indeed bad, but I promised you a startling statistic. Think about how much time you spend in meetings. I remember the last time I worked in a corporate job, we used to complain all the time that we would spend too much time in meetings. That was over 6 years ago, way before the pandemic and the concept of remote work. Earlier this year, Microsoft also put out a report using the numbers gleaned from their software. And the Microsoft survey that came out in May reports that there's been a 28% increase in after-work hours since March 2020. So that means beyond 9 to 5, people are working 28% longer. There's also been a 32% increase in chats sent per person, and a whopping 252% increase in weekly time spent in meetings. 252%. That means that if you were spending 20 hours in meetings during the week before the pandemic, i.e. half your time, assuming a 40-hour work week, you're now spending 50.4 hours in meetings. 50 hours out of 40-hour work week. Does anybody ever get any work done? So the Microsoft report outlines 5 key takeaways that I believe are really accurate and worth noting. The first one is that employees have a new worth it equation. So 50, in other words, what is it that they think is worth staying at work? And these are the things that they prioritize. 53% are more likely to prioritize health and well-being over work than before the pandemic. And 52% of Gen Z and millennials are likely to consider changing employers this year. That's 3% year over year. just to make sure, I just want to make sure everyone is clear on the definitions of what constitutes each generation. If you already know this, I hope you don't get too bored, but I'm going back to basics again. So Generation Z, or Gen Z as they're known, is the generation that's replacing the millennials. They're born between 1977 and 2012, and today they're between 10 and 25 years old. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996. They're now between 26 and 41 years of age. And then there's Generation X before that, who were born between 1965 and 1980, who are now aged 42 to 57. And then there are people like me, the boomers, who were born right after the Second World War between 1946 and 1964. And I mention them because there are many who are still in the workforce today, and they're between 58 and 76 years old. If you're wondering what the new generation is called, that would be Generation Alpha, born after 2010, the same year the iPad was born, by the way. This is the generation that will shape the future of everything. Okay, back to what we were talking about. We were saying that employees have a new worth it equation. Here are some of the quotes that appear in the Microsoft report that I'd like to share with you. This is from the team lead in a professional services who lives in Argentina. And this person says, work is only a part of life. It shouldn't be your whole life or the only thing you care about. A self-employed education professional in Canada says, COVID has not been all doom and gloom for me. It forced me to dig deep and reevaluate what's important. I think the key takeaway here is that meeting new employee expectations will require a mindset shift. Employees worth it equation, is it worth it for me? That equation has changed. In other words, they're actively asking themselves, is it worth it for them to stay in the job? And you know what? There's no going back. They've made up their minds. Is it worth it or is it not? The second takeaway that Microsoft came up with is that managers feel wedged in between leadership and employee expectations. So they found in this report that over half of managers, 54%, feel that leadership at their company is out of touch with employee expectations. And still 74% say they don't have the influence or the resources to do anything about it. They're caught in the middle. They know what needs to be done, but they're powerless to do anything. And to come and back that up, 50% of leaders in this Microsoft survey say that their company is currently or planning to focus on requiring full-time in-person work in the year ahead. That's half the leaders in companies worldwide say they want people to return to work full-time in person. But 52% of respondents say they are somewhat or extremely likely to consider going remote or hybrid in the year ahead. Is anyone listening? Third conclusion, leaders need to make the office worth the commute. So if people say they prefer working remote or hybrid, okay, then they have to know why they come to the office. But only 28% of companies have created agreements that create team norms around hybrid work. 43% of remote workers say they don't feel included in meetings. And yet only 27% of companies have created new meeting etiquette to ensure that everybody feels included and engaged. We talked earlier about the startling statistics on time spent in meetings and in chats and in after-hour work. Another key takeaway is that flexible work does not mean that you're always on. Employers need to recognize that these demands, working overtime, time spent in meetings, chats, etc., always being on, this is going to lead to employee burnout. It already is leading to employee burnout. And the fifth conclusion that Microsoft came to is that rebuilding social capital looks different in a hybrid world. So what is social capital? I'm not a sociologist, so of course I looked it up. So simply put, social capital is the relationships that you build with people through a variety of things, through actions. It's the glue that holds our society together. And in a work context, it refers to the relationships that we forge with our coworkers, with our teams. And Microsoft and many others claim that a hybrid work environment has had an impact on our relationships. Teams are becoming more siloed. Employees who have thriving relationships with their immediate team members report better well-being than those with poor relationships. In other words, they found that 76% of employees who have good relationships with their team members are in better health than those who don't, and that's 57%. But, I would argue that this issue isn't always the sole responsibility of leaders to solve. Have you ever worked in a place where you had colleagues in another city? Today, of course, it's very prevalent, or a supplier or a client for that matter. I used to simply pick up the phone and ask a question and start a conversation, and you build a relationship over time. But today's world and today's generations are different. I have a friend who routinely texts me. She says, "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" And, the first time I received this message, I panicked. I thought something was going on. Maybe there's something horrible has happened in her life, when in fact, she just wanted to chat. What happened to just picking up the phone? I love texting as much as the next person. And sure, there are times when I don't feel like talking, but there are times, especially at work, when connecting with people is important. And I think it's time we consider training in how to build and maintain relationships. And this, by the way, is also invaluable if you're job searching. A very valuable skill to have. I'm sure I'll say more about this in another episode. But if you're searching now, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. You can book a free consultation on my website, www.reinventing-u.com, or by going directly to my calendar at www.calendly.com/Danielle-Silverman. The conclusion I hope we're all coming to regarding the world of work is that it's time for leaders to create a culture that embraces flexibility and prioritizes employee well-being. They need to understand that this is a competitive advantage that will build a thriving organization and drive long-term growth. You're listening to Reinventing-U with Danielle Silverman. When we come back, what is the Great Quitting and how is it different from the Great Resignation? Welcome back to Reinventing-U. Today, we're talking about the world of work and how it's changing life for millions of employees around the world. The very latest trend to hit the world of work today is called the Great Quitting. Or sorry, I'm wrong. It's called quiet quitting. If you're active on TikTok, you've certainly heard about it. And if you're not active on TikTok, well, the quiet quitting is not what you think. It's not about employees quitting their jobs in droves. It's about employees staying in their jobs, but doing only what their job descriptions say they're supposed to do. In the parlance of unions and collective agreements, we call that work to rule, working exactly the hours prescribed, not a minute more, doing the tasks you were prescribed to do, and no more. No extra projects, no overtime, no working weekends, or attending social events after hours because the boss said she wanted you there. Before I go on a little bit about this, I'd like to share with you some of the TikTok videos that you may or may not have seen. They're very, very telling. So here we go. Here's the first one.
Here's my take on the whole quiet quitting conversation that's going on right now. Quiet quitting is doing the bare minimum at work and not going 110% above and beyond expectations. And it's being defined as leaving work on time, not checking your emails outside of work hours, and not subscribing to hustle culture, which Isn't that what a job should be already? It's one of those narratives that paints the employee as the villain, when the symptoms of quiet quitting, like being disengaged from work, not being motivated, being disconnected from the values and the missions of the company, are mostly things that the company needs to solve and address. Bottom line is that people just want to detach their identities from their working life. It's got to be a two-way street from the employer as well, because employees want to feel supported in their role and in their life.
I was particularly struck by this young man who really said it very, very well. He expressed the frustration of young people today in an incredible way. So I'll let you listen.
I just got off work and I saw a video of an older gentleman talking about quiet quitting and how like our generation is just lazy and we don't want to work for anything, and how we're never going to be able to go get the brand new house or the new car because we're not putting in the extra work. Most of the videos and most of the takes that I've seen are very polarizing. It's one, just the older generation saying that the youth is lazy and whatever, and the younger generation saying that like you don't see the hard work that we're putting in. I think there's validity in both. And I think what older generations are having a really hard time conceptualizing is that we're f***ed. I work a minimum wage tips job position, and if I were to ask any of my coworkers that are around my age when they're going to buy their first home, they're going to laugh at me. They're going to laugh because they don't know if they're going to be able to pay rent next month. One of the main talking points that my generation uses is, well, it was a lot cheaper to buy a house back in the day and you could work a minimum wage job and put in the extra hours and actually buy a home. I think that's the biggest point that's going over a lot of people's heads that are complaining about quiet quitting and that this generation doesn't want to work. The reality is many of us that are in my age or a little older, a little younger, are working jobs that do not care about us as people. And I'm going to say that again because I think that's a very, very important distinction that a lot of people are forgetting. I am not going to fucking kill myself over a job that doesn't care about me as a human being. I am not going to put in a 60-hour work week and pull myself up by my bootstraps for a job that does not care about me as a person. Oh, you're being sensitive. Oh, you just want your feelings. But no, I'm saying the bare minimum is that if I'm sick or if I have a family emergency, that job's not going to be like, oh, it's your responsibility to find someone to replace you. So many people my age are coming to the realization that we're just the idea and the notion that we're just able to buy a home in this climate just by putting in some extra hours is outrageous and honestly just so ignorant. 50 years ago, yeah, you could work at McDonald's and put a down payment on a house in your mid-20s. In today's date, that is not possible. Now, let me rephrase that. It is possible. If I work an 80-hour work week, don't go out ever, don't do anything I enjoy, don't take a day off for mental health, for physical health, for whatever, eat ramen noodles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for a couple years, and then maybe I could get approved for a loan, pay off this loan on top of the crippling student loans many of us are in, and then after a couple years of literally killing myself, I can own a home. And you can't just say, oh, people are lazy for not wanting to do that. I'm not even taking into consideration, I don't know if we're going to have a sustainable world in 50 years. I'm asking a genuine question here. Why, as a 22-year-old individual, would I do all of this work to save up for a home in some place that I probably don't want to live in, because chances are I can't afford to live where I want to live, purchase that home, and then not even know if we are going to have a sustainable world to live in 50 years from now? Why would I want to raise kids in a world where I don't know if they're going to have clean air to breathe in 50 years? It all comes back down to you had the privilege of growing up in a world where there was hope and opportunity, and we don't.
There's not much more to be said here. Business leaders, if you're listening, please wake up and smell the coffee. The bare minimum is not about wages. It's about having a life worth living, balanced, fulfilled, happy, not in slavery to a corporation's needs. And if you think that's only the view of young people, here's a take from someone working inside a corporation.
This is for all the bosses and managers out there that are pissed off that their employees are quiet quitting. Newsflash, you are half, if not more, of the problem. Now, I have gone on the record to say that I don't think quiet quitting is the right approach and that it hinders people's abilities to advance, and I stand by that. However, you can't lose sight of the fact that one of the reasons that this phenomenon is happening is because you have mistreated your employees for so long. This is a monster that you have created. Had you appreciated your employees as people, had you promoted them, given them extra money when they had done more than expected, trust me, this would not be happening. So before you point the finger at them, why don't you point the finger right back at you and see what role you have played in making this happen? Because someone who is appreciated will always give more than expected.
By the way, I want to say that this is not a new phenomenon. This kind of situation has existed for a very long time. At the beginning of this episode, when I told you about my experience with a boss who wanted me to put in 130% and I was putting in 300%, that took place in the early 1980s, 40 years ago. And I suffered a short burnout as a result. I wouldn't want that to happen to you. That's why I do what I do. So, is quiet quitting a good thing or a bad thing? Here's one young person's view on the matter.
Quiet quitting does not benefit you at all. I'm seeing all these people thinking that quiet quitting benefits them and not the company. That's not true, because when you become apathetic, not only do you hate your job more, but you create a reputation amongst your colleagues and amongst the people that you work with. And I know a lot of people aren't going to like to hear this, but if you have career goals to do more than what you're doing now, whatever that might be. I don't care if you're a VP today or if you're entry level. I don't care what you're doing. But if you are someone with goals that wants to do things, whatever it might be, that you think is cool, but you don't have the experience or the qualifications to do now, what's going to get you there is going to be the network that you build at your current jobs. If your job is so bad and the people are so bad that you can't find a network there, and that literally, if every single person there thought that you sucked and didn't care about your work and are not a great person to work with, that doesn't matter to you at all, then you need to find a new job immediately, because you're wasting your time and you're making it less and less likely that you're going to get to where you want to go. If that's not the case, and there are a few people there that maybe down the road in 5 years when they go to another company and maybe get a little more high up or whatever could help you to get where you want to be, then quiet quitting is literally wasting your time at this company and shooting yourself in the foot. So please don't do that. If you feel like you have no other choice, get a new job.
So the opinions are clearly divided. Well, all of the videos I've shown you show the people who think about quiet quitting. There are others out there, young people who think that they really need to quiet quit, that this is the only way that they're going to get their message across. I urge them to think again, to think about, I don't know, quiet quitting sounds a bit like going on strike, except that you're not going on strike. It's the period before going on strike where you're working to rule. But does it really help you? Does it really? There may be other ways. Find out if there are other people within the organization who feel the same way. Form a committee. Bring your grievances, again, in union terms, your grievances to the leadership. Or seriously consider looking for a job somewhere else. I mean, if you're not happy in that job, why are you staying? What is it that is keeping you there? What is it that is keeping you from moving on? Is it that you haven't found exactly what you would want to move to? Or is it that you simply don't care one way or the other? You just want to go in, do your job, leave? It's not worth not being happy. I've been there, I know that, and I know so many other people as well who call me day in, day out and say, I no longer like what I'm doing. I work in IT and I don't like what I'm doing anymore. I'm a software project manager, or I work as a lawyer and I don't like what I'm doing anymore. I work in compliance, in finance, and it just doesn't do it for me anymore. Or, my bosses are asking me to work so much overtime, I can't do it. I'm going on burnout. I'm giving my letter in today. Can you help me? It's not worth it. So if you think, or if you find yourself thinking about quiet quitting, I urge you to please speak with me first. Quiet quitting is a real thing. And the reasons behind your wanting to quiet quit are valid, absolutely. but I don't think it'll make you feel any better. So let's chat about what you can do instead. Reach out for a free consultation at www.calendly.com/Danielle-Silverman, or visit my website at www.reinventing-U.com. That's www.reinventing-U.com. And next time on Reinventing You, on the next episode, I'm going to talk in much more detail about why people are thinking of quitting, why they are quitting, and what companies should be looking at to do about this. Because after all, it does drive the world economy. And the world economy is not in good shape. Thank you for listening. Danielle Silverman, bye for now. Thank you for listening to Reinventing You with me, your host, Danielle Silverman. Tune in on the second and fourth Monday each month at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com. Join me and feel inspired and optimistic about your future. We only get one life, so embrace change and thrive with me. Find work that aligns best with your soul and what you enjoy. For more information, go to reinventingyou.com.